everyone. Welcome to the 5-Beer Plan. I'm Brian, and this is the ongoing saga of an everyman's ale trail. In this episode, I will see how clean yeast can get, add some adjuncts in the homebrew project, wrap up with Diana and Jacob at Ten Wasp Brewing, and review a Czech Pilsner from 903 Brewers. But before we get this party started, here is this episode's burning question. What is your favorite Czech Pilsner? According to Untappd, mine is a 4.9% ABV beer from Dot and Line Brewing in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I enjoyed this beer just this summer. It was a side pull, which is the only way to enjoy a Czech Pilsner on tap. Malty and crisp with a great hop bitterness. In this segment of Yeast Feast, where I delve into one of the critical ingredients to beer and brewing, I look at the process of yeast washing. This has been something I've had on my radar ever since my Florida homebrew encounter with Brian a couple of years ago. It was at that point I was introduced to the concept. It can be referred to as yeast harvesting or yeast rinsing. As one of the most expensive ingredients of beer, the idea behind this process is to save money. A dry packet of yeast starts at around $6. For a liquid yeast, the cost can be 2 times or even more. And keep in mind that this is enough for a 5-gallon batch. If you were to scale this up to a commercial setting, this is not an insignificant cost. For the brewing purist, yeast harvesting can even be used to develop or maintain a yeast strain specific to your brewhouse, whether it be in a hobby or commercial setting. I've had a tab open in my browser from beercrafter.com for several months regarding this very topic. So in a simple sense, here are the steps needed to harvest your own yeast according to them. 1. Prepare a liter of sterile water by boiling it for 15 minutes and set it aside to cool to room temperature. 2. Sterilize 3 jars and lids by boiling or dipping in sanitizer solution. One of them should be large enough for the slurry in the bottom of the fermenter plus 4 times as much water. 3. Sanitize the rim of the carboy to ensure that the yeast does not get infected. 4. Swish the fermenter around to break up the tube. If it is too thick, use some of the sterile water to loosen it up. 5. Transfer the liquid to one of the jars, the largest one, and cover it with the lid. 6. Put the jar in the refrigerator and let everything settle for 20 minutes. This will allow the tube to separate from the yeast. The tube will be a dark brown layer, and the yeast will have a lighter white color. 7. If needed, you can transfer the yeast once more to one of your other jars. The intent here is to separate the healthy yeast from the tube. Once again, swirl and let settle, now for 30 minutes in the fridge. If needed, this can be done a 3rd time. 8. Leave the capped jar in the refrigerator for a few days. The water will separate from the yeast and sit on top. 9. Now it is ready for your next brew day. You gently pour off the liquid, swirl the yeast, and then pitch it as you normally would. Of course, make sure your yeast has been brought to pitching temperature before you do. As a small batch homebrewer, this seems like a lot of work for such a small amount of beer. But maybe one of these days I will give it a try and see if I can get my yeast clean as a whistle. In this segment of Homebrew Hijinks, where I document my homebrew adventures, I move the holiday cream ale to secondary. So now that my base beer was ready, it was time to condition the beer on my special ingredient, a homemade cranberry orange relish. The recipe I chose came from growforagecookferment.com. It contains fresh cranberry, fresh orange zest and juice, ginger, cinnamon, star anise, and honey. Super simple and flavorful. I cooked up the relish as soon as the beer went to primary fermentation, and then froze it in a quart freezer bag to keep it fresh and ensure that no additional bacteria would sully my beer. The day before I would move my beer to secondary, I pulled the bag out of the freezer and placed it in the refrigerator to thaw. The day of transfer, I moved the bag out of the refrigerator and then allowed it to come to room temperature. I prepared my equipment, the glass carboy, airlock, hose, and other items I would use with my PBW solution. I also sanitized a muslin sock and an ounce of cherry whiskey, which would hold my relish in the fermenter. I placed the secondary fermenter on a kitchen chair, which would let gravity be used to my advantage. I placed the sock of relish in the fermenter, primed the autosiphon, and transferred the beer over the top of the relish. I then sealed up the secondary fermenter, placed the airlock on the lid, as there would likely be some yeast transfer that might like the fresh sugars I just gave it. I would leave this for a few days before tasting it once more to ensure the essence of the holidays shine through. I cleaned up my primary equipment and put it away for the next brew day. Next episode, I bottle up and taste the finished product. Now, it's time for Barstool Banter. In this episode, I conclude my chat with Diana and Jacob from Ten Wasp Brewing, located in Sumner, Iowa. I don't usually stretch out the banter over more than a couple of episodes, but there was so much great information to share, I probably could have even done 4 segments. The topics switch to community focus and support, how they use beer for educating this small town, and of course, their answers to my favorite question. If you find yourself within an hour of Sumner, be sure to stop into this community gathering spot for a handcrafted pint of thoughtfully brewed beer, some great conversation, and possibly an opportunity to be able to join in their giving culture. Late last season and into this season, have progressed from talking about beer to talking about hops to now talking about yeast. One of the things that when I was first doing the research, and it was probably like 9-10 months ago, I found an article about yeast washing, and I was like, what is this? Diana mentioned that you do yeast washing. So can you tell me a little bit about that and maybe what the rationale is behind that?
So not all the beers, but some of the beers. I think we kind of have a house strain that of a liquid culture that we harvest, repitch into other beers. I mean, you can just do that. And being a small brewery like we are, sometimes, whatever, hope for the best that it's not any foreign bacteria or anything in there. Some bigger breweries probably have more assurances if they do yeast washing, but just washing yeast in general, there's a few different methods. Acidifying the wash is one of them, but we use the chlorine dioxide. You can wash yeast with too, just a very low concentration. Chlorine dioxide itself is a little acidic, so you can basically just add that to it. It will kill cells that aren't very viable anyways, and then it will also kill most of the bacteria that's in there. So you basically take your harvested yeast off your conical and then little ratio of chlorine dioxide diluted into the yeast itself, and then just repitch that into another beer. Or you may want to, if you're not brewing right away, you could put it in a starter or another vessel to keep that yeast culture going. But if it stays in that solution long enough, it'll kill everything.
Okay.
But basically, it's just assurances of consistency, and I've seen maybe a little better ferments off it too, killing some of the yeast cells that aren't super viable.
Like what kind of style of beer are you typically repitching in then with this harvested yeast?
We use 1272 is what like Y yeast culture would be, or A72. We get some yeast from Brewing Science Institute in Colorado, more commercial pitches, but they do small enough stuff for us too. But a lot of that yeast is a lot of American style beers. So, I mean, most of what we've got up here, we also use that in our hazies too. Surprisingly enough, a pretty good hazy. It creates a stable haze, and it isn't quite as ester driven as like London Ale 3. That's what a lot of people use. And I think that's fine in there. I think sometimes you can really tell what that is. I think the one beer we sent you, the Thanks for the Memories, uses that A72. And then the beer you're drinking now is, I think, a variant of the London Ale 3, just because we didn't have that yeast available to use. So sometimes it's actually the verdant yeast from Walleman that is in the one you're drinking. If I don't have a fresh pitch or something fresh going on with that A72, then I'll just rely on that. For us, that's been pretty good.
How long can you keep some of that harvest yeast around once you've got it in the suspension?
I mean, 2 weeks max. So, I mean, we only have 4 fermenters, 4 2-barrel fermenters right now. I mean, actually consistently reusing liquid yeast is a bit of a challenge, especially when we have like the Norwegian appeal that uses a different yeast. So lagers too. So it does get a bit tricky juggling the scheduling with repitching beers and everything. So I
How,
do like to keep dry yeast on hand too. I think a lot of the stuff these days out there is just fine. For me, I actually started using dry yeast in the professional brewing setting, I think during COVID when schedules weren't super consistent. It was hard to keep yeast going. And honestly, really kind of fell in love with it out of ease of use because we
yeah,
were just pitching one-offs and then dumping. We weren't even reusing that yeast,
yeah,
which you can. I think when I homebrewed, I kind of was thinking you need to use liquid yeast all the time, and then that carried on into. And there are some styles or some strains you can't get dry versions of, so
yeah.
it is definitely good. I think sometimes it creates a little different profile.
What I think people probably don't realize is that yeast is probably one of the most expensive parts of brewing. I suppose part of the impetus to harvest yeast is to save some money as well, right?
Right? Yeah. You said you homebrew, right?
I do. So it's
Yeah.
like $6 or $7 for just a dry packet of yeast.
That liquid strain that we use sometimes, we've taken that from probably 5 to 8 generations. So off of that one. So if you think about how much you pay for it one time, divide that
Hmm.
among 8. Technically, if you treat it right, you could go infinitely. You start to get genetic variations of maybe it's not flocking as much, maybe the flavor profile is off a little bit. So probably won't ever take anything greater than 10 to 15, but cost is the huge thing.
Yeah, sure,
I
sure.
haven't been able to get anything super far here just because at some point I'm like, well, I need to brew a lager or something different. So at some point it goes down the drain, unfortunately, but
Yeah,
it served its time well.
sure. So do you just use water out of the tap? Do you use ROI or something else for your system?
Yeah, we use RO. We have a system
Okay.
here. The tap water here is groundwater, so it's a little hard, a little alkaline that in general just doesn't make the best beer. So kind of
Yeah.
just starting from that blank canvas
Hmm.
is easier and the styles of beers I like to brew and drink are probably paler in color too. So I think that is better for those type of beers. And then
Yeah.
kind of creating that profile based on that. But dark beers do present a challenge with that RO water. So you have to we add baking soda or something back in to
Hmm.
kind of help with that pH balance of the mash is a
Yeah.
lot of kind of what I'm looking for at least.
Yeah. There's a lot of alchemy involved in brewing.
Yeah, I didn't know that when I got into it, but
For sure. I always say that, like, brewing's magic, It's like you throw some water in a pot, throw in some ingredients, put it into a jar for a few weeks, and you pull it out and you're like, oh, I've got alcohol. Cool.
yeah, I'd say with brewing beer, you can get as technical as you want, or you can just throw some yeast and some sweet, barley water type stuff, and it'll ferment. It'll make a beer, but
Yeah. Whether you want to drink it or not, maybe a different
right,
story.
yeah. So I think that's my brewing philosophy too. Is that I think ever since for sure here and other breweries, but I don't think there's ever been a beer recipe that I've probably brewed exactly the same 100%. There's always
Yeah.
a little tweak that I'm like, let's try this and see if it helps that much more or if it's, a little worse. So,
The other thing I like about what you're doing there as well, because I think, Diana, you mentioned the challenges of the industry. No longer are consumers going to pay for mediocre beer.
right.
That's the bottom line. So the fact you're doing things right with real ingredients,
Yeah.
you're using a lot of care and intentionality with what you're doing. I mean, that's going to take you a long way, I think, in the industry, even amongst the 79 breweries that are there, currently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the truth. And I mean, I think also, like we had a black IPA, which we'll do another one in the next couple weeks. That, or we've done like a Kolsch, we've got a Luker side pull faucet, like a check pour. And so I think sometimes being able to use some of those, not weirder styles, but things that just are not as common
Hmm.
where we are is a really cool educational piece too, right? So like you're able to talk
Absolutely.
about like, you get people that come in and they're like, have been to dozens of breweries, tons of breweries, and have never heard of a black IPA. I've never tasted one before. And why can't you call it a Kolsch in the US, right? Like these different things. Or what do you mean in the Czech Republic, they do like foam first, beer second? Like what a weird, what a thing that's unfamiliar. And so I think for us, it's really cool to also use those things as kind of teaching tools. So like you're able to, especially people who maybe only had Busch Light or have never been to a brewery, or this is just very new for them. So again, like taking away that pretension, like I said earlier, letting people try a hazy and a West Coast and a black IPA, and like really talking about the different like malt profiles or whatever that is, and using the space as just always arming, it's always better. The more information people have, the more education people have, people are better armed to go out and share that with others. And so I think that's really cool for us too, doing different things and using those as a driver to like make people better, like global beer citizens too, right? This idea that people drink beer differently in different parts of the country, but in different parts of the world. And that's cool.
I wish I lived closer to Sumner.
Yeah. On over. And we went to Prague and Pilsen for a week. So spent time at Pilsner Urquell, and we took a Czech pouring class from Adam, who was a master tapster. And so you're learning how to do like a snit and a hedlinka and a Maliko pour, and you're like, oh dang, this is so cool.
Yeah.
That's like next level beer.
And I think that part kind of helps set you apart too, pouring techniques, pouring styles too. I think we don't have it. I've never had it, but I know like Japanese style pours are kind of popular too, where they do kind of different foam techniques too, like the Czechs do. But it's just really interesting. I think that's where I see us going, and just kind of getting it more into that too. And whether or not everyone in this community likes it.
Sure. Sure.
But again, you're brewing on such a smaller scale that it's okay if they don't like it. I mean, worst case scenario is you guys have a little party with your friends and let's say, hey, let's just kick this keg, guys.
Again, this is a town of 2,000 people. And so like, what a cool way to build community, right? Where people are like, what the hell are you using? And you're like, oh, well, like it's this thing. And then you get to share that. And that's, I don't know, that's cool.
I'm going to shift gears just slightly here, Diana. You mentioned earlier you've got a charitable arm of Ten Wasp. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's called Sumner Community Fund, Sumner Community Causes, Sumner Community Fund. So each month, so we opened in February of last year. And so our first month was then March. So we started this immediately. This was a part of planning right from the get. And so each month we pick a local organization. And there are a few ways to support that. Once a month, we offer a brewery tour. It's $5. All that money goes into the fund. When you go to pay your tab, you can either round up your credit card bill, add on a couple dollars, or we have a cash tip jar by the register. And so then all of that money gets put into that fund and we directly donate that. So it's the food shelf, it's the library, we have a volunteer emergency management program, SEMS it's called, and a volunteer fire department with about 30 people. And so it's all of those things. And we give, the checks are usually between like $350 and $850 a month. So it's certainly not huge, but I think it's another really good way to like build community, right? And just to show people that when you come in here, like, yes, we need to pay our staff, we need to keep the lights on, but also if we can use this space as a way to give, an extra $800 to the fire department so they can get, a little more training, a little more equipment or whatever it is that they need. Again, we're all in this community together. And so that's been really cool. I think I always tell people I'm never worried about the beer, right? You're going to come in, you're going to have excellent beer. I'm never worried about that. The other ways that we can be known as a community driver is really cool for me. So I think one of my favorite things is when local people bring in their people, right? People from out of town or their friends or whoever for the first time. And I can hear people when they come in be like, oh, they do so much for the community, or they run, they kind of talk about the programs we have as a way that like they also share that ownership. That's really cool for me. So just to reiterate, the community fund is not us, right? That is the community, that is community money. So we are not donating that money. That is all community focused.
We're just a hub.
Yeah, we're just the connector. Absolutely. Yep. And so I think that's really cool.
Yeah. And again, it just ties back into that whole idea that, the craft brewery now, is the community hub. And people don't realize that. So it's great that you're embracing the community that way and interfacing with them, because I think it's just a very cool extension of what you're doing there. So good job with that.
I think for us too, sometimes, when you live in a place for so long and your family lives here, your grandparents, your great grandparents, maybe you don't always have a lot of outside experiences. I think it's really easy sometimes to maybe get a little jaded with what your community has to offer, right? Like
Yeah.
we've had a number of people when we first moved here that are like, why the hell did you pick this place? Like, why didn't you pick
Yeah.
a different place? Like, why would you even move
Like
here?
they were skeptical or
Yeah,
like,
like this
what
is
are you
not,
here for?
yeah. And so I think like, but then for us coming in, we're like, wow, you have a trail system and there's a cool park and there's like an excellent library. And so you see things with different eyes. And so I
Yeah.
think being able to remind folks or like, again, be that like that driver, that connector of, that we all show up and we're all better when we're all together and people are like, oh, I didn't even know that these people needed money or I didn't even know
Yeah.
that this was a thing. And so I think that part has been really cool. And, so I mentioned the food shelf. The nearest food shelf is about 10 miles outside of town. So we don't actually have a food shelf in Sumner. And so, right now, politically, right, there's a lot of food insecurity
Yeah.
and all of that is in the news right now. And so we are like the temporary food hub. So there is a more permanent thing being set up at the library. But in the meantime, we've got back tables in the brewery just full of food donations and people can come in and take what they need until something more permanent is set up. And I think, again, thinking it's not usually what a brewery is used for, right? That's not what you usually think of, but being able to be that community hub, or we have a senior living facility on the edge of town. And last year we did a giving tree where they told us what they needed. And then we set up this tree and I think oh my gosh, we had people donate like over 150 different items. And then we
Wow.
hosted like a community wrapping party and then, delivered everything. And so now this year we've got about 200 tickets on the giving tree for Hillcrest. And it's a lot of like, nail polish and deodorant and fuzzy socks and
Yeah.
things for the memory care unit. And the way that the community shows up for those things is just very cool, right? We've already, I think Saturday was the first day of the giving tree. And I think we're already about 25 tickets down that have already gone out the door. So
And they're not
it's
things
so
that are going to
cool.
break the bank for the normal
Yep.
person, right? I mean, but
Yep.
they're going to just really bless somebody who has no idea,
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just, that it's
That's
cool.
cool.
And
It's cool.
I also just think like, I know different people maybe have different opinions, but I think, we would not exist. This brewery would not exist without community support, right? Like you
Yes.
can have the best beer on the planet, but if nobody comes up, like nobody comes in, nobody trusts you, nobody likes you, like you don't have shit, right? And so I think you just think like we are successful and we are able to hire this phenomenal team. Like this brewery is successful because of all of the people that show up and trust us and give us their time and their money. And God, the least we can do, right, is like have rice and beans and Oreos and socks and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like for people who need it in the community. And
Yeah.
the least we can do is find ways to give back. I mean,
Yeah.
I would argue that that's our responsibility, right? Like it is our job. What people have given to us, like we absolutely have a responsibility to give that back. So
100%. I love that.
Yeah.
I love your hearts and what you've got going on there. So that's really cool. Well, hey, one last fun question for you, Jacob, because Diana doesn't drink. Although you could answer the question if you wanted to, Diana.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
if you were a beer, what style would you be and why?
I think right now I'd be a Czech Pils
Oh,
because just drinkability and you can have a conversation like this and you talk and talk and talk and you can talk about the beer, but it doesn't have to be about the beer. You know what I mean? Like
Uh-huh.
it's not the conversation piece. It's just you can have a conversation about it. And it can be served multiple different ways to give you different textures too.
Great
So,
answer. I love that.
yeah. I would say I mentioned before that lavender lemonade hard seltzer. That is, I drank like probably 8 ounces of that in the whole time that we've had it, which is a huge deal for me. There's nothing else there's no beer. There's nothing else that I've ever drank that much of. And so it was also over multiple weeks. So it was really only like, like an ounce at a time, but it was phenomenal. And so I think that's my pick for sure. Like a really kind of light, slightly fruity, slightly sweet, some type of a hard seltzer
Okay.
choice. Yeah.
I
How about
like
you?
that. Oh gosh. See, now you shouldn't be turning the tables on me like that. So if I were like 4 years ago when I first answered this question, I would have said a stout. I would say these days, I think I would lean into maybe more of a Kolsch because you can't hide behind it. What you see is what you get. It's easy drinking. There's nice hop profile. So I think that's probably where I would lean into is maybe the Kolsch.
That's a good answer too.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Jacob, Diana, it has been a blast talking with you.
It's been so
And
much
seriously,
Yeah, thank you.
I could talk to you for hours. Thanks for spending so much extra time. Gosh, I look forward to maybe at some point getting back out there and actually raising a glass of water or another nice IPA with you, Jacob.
Yeah,
It'll be so fun.
absolutely.
It'll be awesome. Cheers.
Appreciate you guys.
Last call.
It's nearly time to wrap things up, but first, one more for the road. This episode I'm drinking Polka King of the Midwest from 903 Brewers based in Sherman, Texas. I picked this up at my favorite bottle shop, Harvest, just before Thanksgiving. From the brewer, we've taken our famous Polka King of the Midwest and reimagined it as a true Czech-style Pilsner. Crisp, clean, and perfectly hopped. This updated version still dances to its polka roots, but now with a bohemian flair. Inspired by none other than Gus Polinski, this beer is a tribute to his spirit. Bold, charming, and impossible to forget. Without further delay, this is a 4.5% ABV Czech Pilsner. Apparently, this is typically a spiced beer released at the holidays, but now reimagined to pay even further homage to the comedy great John Candy, who left us too soon. If you're not aware, Gus Polinski was featured in none other than Home Alone. As an aside, I just finished watching I Like Me documentary on Amazon Prime. If you're a fan of John Candy, it is well worth the time. So I poured this out into a proper Pilsner glass. It is a beautiful, clear straw color, and it has a nice white, fluffy white head. On the nose, it's got some nice biscuity, malty notes there. Maybe even a touch of sweetness. But just from a visual perspective, this beer is so inviting. First sip impression? Yeah. Some Czech Pilsners that I've had in the past don't have that nice big hop bite to it. This one does. It's got a nice crispness to it and just a nice bite to it as well that comes from the hops that are used here. It even has just a little bit of a drying effect on the palate. It's got a mild bitterness to it. Again, malt forward. But again, that dryness, that's what sets the Czech Pilsner apart in my experience. Really, really like this beer. And of course, the can is fantastic. So the can has the 903 Brewers logo with the Polka King of the Midwest with a accordion. And then as you turn the can around, there's the smiling visage of Gus Polinski and the Kenosha Kickers with a couple of pints of beer that are splashing around behind him in the background. And it says playing all their fairly well-known hits from the 70s. And just to even take it a little bit further, again, I love the playfulness of this beer. They say that it pairs with Kiss Me Polka, Polka Twist, and, of course, Polka Polka Polka. Well, I really like this beer, and frankly, there's not a whole lot extra I can say about it other than I give this one a high 3.5 tasters out of 5 on the Flightboard, with an extra quarter just for the can art itself. Cheers, 903 Brewers. I'm always looking for new craft beverages to review. So if you've got one from your favorite local craft brewery, meadery, or cidery you'd like me to drink and describe, reach out and let me know. That's all for this episode of the 5 Beer Plan. With so many podcasts out there, thanks for choosing to listen to mine. Join me next time as I wrap up another year with the next step in the homebrew project and a few holiday beer reviews. Remember to hit the subscribe button on your preferred podcast platform to be notified of new episodes. Follow me on Instagram as well, 5 Beer Plan 2022, to see what is happening on my personal ale trail. I'd love to hear from you, and there are several ways you may do so. Leave a comment for this episode on Spotify, direct message me on Instagram, or email me directly, 5beerplan@frontier.com. Be sure to support your local breweries, choose your beers wisely, and drink them responsibly. Until next time, keep walking your ale trail, and stay thirsty, my friends.